We begin today with the 2014 World Watch List, a ranking of the 50 countries in which the persecution of Christians for religious reasons is most severe. And according to the report, the amount of Christians killed because of their faith doubled in 2013. The report is released every year by Open Doors, a non-denominational Christian group that supports persecuted Christians around the world. According to the list, the 5 worst countries to practice the religion are as follows. North Korea takes the #1 spot for the 12th year in a row. The report cites no numbers on the amount of people killed. However, it says that Christians there faced, quote, the highest imaginable pressure, with between 50 to 70,000 living in political prison camps. The next ranked country is Somalia, where Open Doors reports that this year 10 Christians were targeted and killed by members of the militant group Al-Shabaab. The third most dangerous place for Christians is Syria, a country plagued by an ongoing civil war. Open Doors says that in 2013 there were 1,213 martyr killings in the country. That's more than half of all martyr killings the organization documented worldwide. Number 4 is Iraq, where Christians are increasingly threatened and attacked by Islamic terrorist groups. A local source has told Open Doors that 1 Christian is killed every 2 to 3 days there. And in 5th place is Afghanistan. Open Doors says the influx of Islamic extremism and tribal pressure have made practicing Christianity unsafe. Some lawmakers have publicly said that converts to Christianity should die. To discuss the findings of this report a little bit more earlier, I was joined by David Curry, President and CEO of Open Doors USA. Since North Korea is #1 on this list, I first asked David what's going on there that makes it so difficult to practice Christianity.
Well, there are different reasons why countries show up on our World Watch List of countries where it's very difficult to have freedom of faith, to be a Christian. North Korea suffers under what is a very strange combination, which is a form of a communist oppression mixed with a theocracy where the leaders for now 3 generations believe that they're God. So any ideology or theology which would question that or challenge that, they're putting down with force. And you don't hear a lot about that force or that oppression on Christians or directed at Christians because of the secrecy and because the control is so total.
And like you said, I mean, generally it is so hard to obtain information on the people of North Korea. You know, what were your sources and how were you, able to figure out sort of the beliefs of a population that's so heavily guarded by its government?
Open Doors now for 60 years has supported persecuted Christians wherever they may be. And so we get our data from the local level. We work with folks who are believers in these countries. We get our responses from them right on the ground level. So that's how we get this data together. And we measure it on a number of factors. Violence is one of them, but also pressure and squeezing of them in more subtle ways, perhaps.
And let's talk about what we're seeing happen in Syria. Of course, we know that the country is now embroiled in a civil war and has been for over 2 years. How do you know that the numbers that we're seeing, because we know that it's been extraordinarily high, aren't just a reflection of sort of how many people are dying as a whole, and that it's actually there's a targeted persecution of Christians?
That's right. I mean, there's a larger humanitarian crisis going on in Syria. But what we're using is when we use numbers of martyrdom for faith, are only numbers that we can identify. They're just the tip of the iceberg from media outlets and other sources of folks who've been martyred within Syria. What's happened in Syria is you have a civil war. Clearly, there's a lot of damage to the society at large. But there are also efforts from Islamic extremist groups to target Christian areas where historically Christians have settled, and Christian churches, soft targets, in order to raise response from some of the larger population.
And that leads me to my next question, which is that, we're seeing this conflict really take hold of the region in both Syria and Iraq, which are both obviously on the list. And the conflict, you really see it happen more so between Muslim factions, the Sunnis and the Shiites. And Christians seem to, by and large, sort of be out of the conflict, or at least not incite the conflict. So how is it that you think that Christians are ultimately the ones being targeted here?
Well, in some cases, they're being scapegoated. You have Islamic extremists who feel theologically or for political motivations that Christians are a threat to their society or the way they view Sharia law being played out. So there's a number of factors, and every country is different. In Iraq, the government either seems to be unable or unwilling to support this what we would call soft targets of Christian churches. You had a bombing just at Christmas of 2 churches where people were going to worship the Christmas holiday. So it varies from country to country and from area to area. Absolutely.
And also, you also see Iraq and Afghanistan both on the list, and these are 2 countries that the United States has most recently gone to war with. Now, I know you guys have only been doing the survey for 12 years, but how would you describe the trend regarding the persecution of Christians? Would you say that it's increased since the first year you did it, or?
Well, we've seen a doubling of martyrs that we can identify just from last year, and some of those numbers, a large portion of them, the largest portion, is in the Syrian conflict. But there's also other countries like Nigeria and Somalia and some of these where there's a targeting of Christians. So we feel like it's getting worse. 9 of the top 10 on our world watch list are Islamic extremist factions and or governments. 36 of the top 50. So that's the main driver this year. It's not always been that way, but it's certainly a trend that we're concerned about.
Sure. And, aside from people being targeted and murdered, what kinds of obstacles are Christians facing in practicing their religion, just generally?
Yeah, well, there's a issue here in many of the countries where they are operating as a minority, and there's a lot of social pressure from families to conform. In many countries on the World Watch List, it is illegal to convert to Christianity if you so choose. What we want is a free marketplace of ideas where people have the opportunity to study and choose what they think for themselves.
Sure. And when you take a look at the numbers more generally, I know that between 2012 and 2013 there was a huge jump, but have you seen the numbers go down at all in those 12 years, or have they just been consistently getting higher and higher and higher?
What we're doing is ranking the countries as they are today. And so we've seen a fluctuation, and it's changed. When we first started, we were dealing with communist oppression. Now we're dealing with Islamic extremism. So it's different, and the numbers have changed as time has changed.
Well, it's all very interesting, and we will certainly follow your statistics going forward. Thank you so much. David Curry, President and CEO of Open Doors USA.
Thank you.
The group, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, has been gaining ground, even taking credit for Thursday's suicide bombing in Beirut, Lebanon. So will these Islamic victories spread, or can the Islamic extremism be contained? Let's turn now to Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert, a Republican and member of the House Judiciary Committee, who was in the Middle East, including you were in Libya and Lebanon just last month.
That's right, Beirut. Yeah, just 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Yeah. What do you make of the news, this troubling news in Anbar province of the Al-Qaeda flag apparently raised, and they've taken over these cities that this country, our troops spent so much blood and toil to try and win 2 years ago.
Right, and I was there right after they had taken Fallujah back and meeting with the Marines.
2004.
And when you think about the blood and the treasure that was lost, especially the blood, taking that city, and then you had this badly bungled when this administration took over. There were problems before Bush left, but he had basically teed up a status of forces agreement, and because he was trying to be gracious, he could have probably got the deal worked out, but he was going to let that be a great, noteworthy achievement right off the bat for the Obama administration, and they didn't do it. And we knew that Maliki was under tremendous pressure from Iran, and we didn't do that. And so we knew that as soon as we left, Iran was going to be coming in. Basically, Maliki would be more of a puppet. He'd either do what Iran said, and then once that happened, you'd start having civil war between the Sunni and Shia factions. And so it's all playing out. This was all very predictable, as John Bolton said earlier today.
Now, the Iraqis, the Maliki government says they'll be able to crush, in their words, this revolt by the Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists within a couple of days. Do you think that they can hold out and that they will win? Or what happens if the Islamic extremists win and spread this?
Well, that's the problem. This administration has been helping Islamic extremists in Libya and in Syria and around the Middle East.
How have they been doing that? They're certainly
We've been providing weapons. When we knew Al-Qaeda was infused in the rebels in Libya, we provided them weapons. We were trying to get back weapons and get them to Syrian rebels. We knew the Syrian rebels were infused with Al-Qaeda. Assad's not a good guy, but we have been helping. And I'm telling you, we're talking to some of our moderate Muslim allies in the Middle East. They privately will say, we don't know if we're going to be the next ally you throw under the bus. You know, we keep seeing you throw away allies. And I tell you, Eric, the first thing we ought to do is, instead of having Secretary Kerry go to Israel and start saying you're going to give away land from which you will be attacked. He doesn't realize that. He doesn't realize a lot of things. But instead of going to Israel and saying you will give away more land you'll be attacked from, why don't we go to Israel, as I did 2 weeks ago with Steve King, Michelle Bachmann, and say, you know what? What do you think about what should be done? That's what you do with an ally that's in the region. And I'll tell you one other thing. Afghanistan is going to blow up. The Taliban's already poised to take over that. And as Masood and some others have told some of us privately and have said publicly, all you have to do in Afghanistan is get an amendment into the Constitution you forced on us that says that we can elect our governors in each region, that we can elect our mayors and police chiefs. And if you will do that, instead of having a stovepipe centralized government, then we can keep the Taliban from taking over.
So what do we do? Take a look at that map. From Afghanistan right on through the Middle East, you've got an apparent resurgence of the Islamic extremists with the car bombs. 20 people killed in Baghdad this morning. The car bomb in Beirut just a couple of days ago. What do we do? How does this be stopped? Is that possible? Or do you think that Islamic extremism will just flourish?
No, it can be stopped. That's the great thing, Eric. In Egypt, the reason you didn't show on that map Egypt in that same white color is where they're Islamic extremists is because 30 million Egyptians rose up, moderate Muslims, secularists, Jews, Christians, and said, we don't want the Muslim Brotherhood in charge. They declared it a terrorist group.
Do you think that
the U.S. ought to
the
do
other
that.
Countries?
Yes, absolutely. And that's why the Muslim Brotherhood is trying so hard to get back into Egypt. They know if they lose Egypt, that could spread and peace would spread with it. We need to be helping Egypt. Instead, this administration refuses to supply the Apache helicopters that Egypt is using to help ships get through the Suez Canal. I mean, once they rose up against radical Islam, against the Muslim Brotherhood, this administration cut them off and said, we're not going to help you anymore. We got to stop helping our enemies and help the enemy of our enemies, and this can be solved without a lot of American lives being lost.
Well, Congressman, American lives were lost, and certainly it seems to be spreading, and we'll see how this plays out, especially with the troubling news.
Just help the enemy of our enemy, and American lives will be saved.
Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas with his advice. Congressman,
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Great to